Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to a modern RPG, because this time I would like to present this, Candela Obscura, the quick start guide at least. Now this is by the guys over on Critical Role, and to be completely open with you, I don't watch Critical Role at all. I'm not a big fan of watching people play games, of any type. I don't watch esports, I don't watch people playing Dungeons and Dragons, I don't watch sports. If you invite me to a game of basketball where I'll play basketball with you. If you invite me to play video games with you, I'll play those with you. Role playing, especially role playing, I'll play with you. But watch them, I'm not really into that. The only YouTube series where people are playing that I've ever watched was the guys from Roll High or Die, who did a Star Wars D6 campaign. And I watched the hell out of that and I really enjoyed it, so perhaps I should. But Critical Role has never really caught my attention. But earlier this year, during the Wizard of the Coast scandals that were going on, the rumours came out of Critical Role that they were going to be developing their own role-playing games. So when I saw the news the other day that this had been released, I downloaded it and have a look. And it's not what I expected, not what I expected at all. Because when they were going to be bringing out their own role-playing games, I assumed it was going to be fantasy. I thought it was going to be a Dungeons and Dragons game. Well, apparently they have 2 or 3 other systems in the works, and fantasy will be coming. This is just the first game that they've released, or the quick start version that they've released. And it is a Cthulhu-like game. It's set in a Victorian fantasy land. There only seems to be humans. There is magic, where you are going up against evil spirits, magic, etc. But the booklet doesn't really detail too much of that. It's got a sample adventure in it, which I will comment on, even though I don't usually, because I do find some interesting stuff in that. But let's have a look through it. So, a very nice production quality, first of all. I even like the cover here, where it's ripped and you can see through to the next page, where the edge of the cover's been ripped off. This is done by just putting a layer of the cover over the top, because you can see if I highlight the text here, it's not highlighted when we flip over because they are separate pages. But it's a very nice effect, I really like that. The publishing quality is first class. The handwritten notes in it, there's notes in the margins. It looks lovely. But I have my criticisms of it. This doesn't really seem to be for me, although maybe the full version would be. They just seem to have chosen some odd things to put in a quick start guide to it. So we start off with a credits page here, lots of people involved, all very, very talented. This document within campaigns depictions of abuse of power, body horror, death, gore and other sensitive topics. Reader discretion is advised. So it's giving you an idea what it's going to be like. Now, even though it's got those warnings, I actually found it really light on the horror elements. When we get into the adventure, I'll touch on where you could stretch those somewhat, but actually in the text I find it very horror light. So, getting started in Candela Obscura. We've got an introduction, content warnings and safety tools. Use safety tools like lines and veils of the X card and the open door policy. This seems to be becoming very much part of modern games, where you are putting people's, basically giving them a safe word, where they can say that they don't want things to continue in that direction, they feel very uncomfortable. And that's fair enough. Some players get triggered by different things. What might not bother you might bring up bad memories for me, especially at different times in your life. Sometimes you're far more sensitive to things than other times in your life. So that seems sensible. I have no big complaints. I know there'll be some people out there which are very critical of games laying down rules like this, but I'm not one of them. I think it's fair enough. How to use this guide? We've got the rules of the world, the rules of magic, and the rules of Candela Obscura. Candela Obscura in the game world is an organisation which investigates the occult. Continuing through, we've got preparation, we've got how the dice mechanics work. Now, I'll do a rules breakdown on this, but I don't know whether I'm going to be able to go into too detailed, because the rules are fairly simplistic. Basically, you're rolling a number of d6, 1 to 3 basically, On a 1 to 3 result, the roll is a failure. On a 4 or 5, you get a mixed success. On a 6, you get full success. And if you get multiple 6s, a critical success, you get what you want and something extra. Talks through actions, what drives are, gilded actions, resistances, abilities, roles and consequences, how combat works. One of the elements I like here is there's a spelling error here, and it's pointed out. Spelling error, are you okay? To be back so quickly, I'm worried about you. I'm fine, thank you for the catch. As if it's written by people in the game world. Connections, gear and marks, circle mechanics. The gear thing in the game works quite interestingly, in that your character has a big list of gear, but they can only use certain things from within it. Basically, you've got the list of gear you've got, but I think it's the first 3 things you can choose to have. So you come to an encounter and you need a knife. Well, that's on your gear list, so you choose the knife from amongst your gear. You need something else, and then you need some rope to climb a wall, for example, and you've chosen your 3 things. So the next time you come into an encounter, you can't draw further, even though it's on your equipment list. It's an interesting idea to make characters flexible without spending ages shopping. Circle mechanics, scars and the legacy of harm in horror. Well, that's one of the big elements in this, is that as you get damaged, you pick up scars. And these influence your character, but not completely negatively. So you take physical damage and it overflows into you receiving a scar. And you have to alter your attributes, basically. We'll come on to that in a bit. But you have to reduce one and increase one. So it could be you take damage to your leg. So you will take off the attribute which leads to your speed, because you're limping now. But you have gained to be more cautious because of that accident. So you gain in perception and the equivalent of that, because you are looking out for trouble more. It's an interesting way of developing your character through the harm they receive in adventures. Carrying on through, we've got things like body scar examples, brain scar, bleed scar. The setting of Candela Obscura. Now, this is one of the problems I have with it. There's an interesting setting here where it's in a fantasy world. There's been an invasion at one point. There's a city built on the ruins of an older city. Lots of interesting stuff here. But what they introduce in this rulebook is mainly lots of old stuff. It's telling you about the war which happened decades ago. It's telling you about the old city which is 1,000 years old. It's like somebody coming to your hometown and you're telling them the history of the town, but not telling them where the shops are. The stuff that's actually going to be useful to them. And I find that kind of annoying. While it's nice to know there's a big history to this world, I would find it far more useful, especially in a quick start, to know what the world is like now. I don't need to know the history of the city and when it got invaded and what it's built on, because that's not involved in this current adventure, the sample adventure they give you. I also don't particularly like the names. The city of New Fair, which is built on the city of Old Fair. Well, wouldn't it have just been Fair? How did they know it was Old Fair before, Anyway, carry on. It talks about the sort of government. We talk about Old Fair, the lighthouses, the vast chasm, which is a rift in the ocean, the faraway, the otherwhere, a country across the sea. As I said, I don't really like the names. These sound made-up kiddie names to me. They don't sound very realistic. We've got the districts of New Fair, landmarks. We've got a history of Candela Obscura and how it operates, their key assets, notable figures within it, other organisations. And then we've got an example assignment, Dressed to Kill. Content warning: body horror. Now, it's quite an interesting adventure in that it's based around a realistic situation. It's talking about when radioactive radium, I think it was used in factories, and the radium girls people who worked with this in the factories got poisoned, became very ill, massive cancers, and they died. And it's a horrific piece of history. And this is taking it into, in this fantasy land, they've discovered an element which they're using, and it's having equally bad effects. But it has a dramatic effect as a supermodel, basically showing off the latest colour using this element, dissolves on stage. And it's getting into body horror that way. But while it's hooking into the horror, that's long term. You know, radium only got used because it had positive effects for a long time, and the negative effects took a while to affect, and it affected people who were just working in the factories. Nobody cared about them. Whereas this is affecting the customers. I can't see this becoming a popular thing if it kills the people who are buying it. You're definitely not going to get repeat customers. Also, in the way the adventure's laid out, you know, there's a nice introduction, hook. Although, I have to comment, this is all text that you read out. Read this section to the players as the hook for this adventure. That is a lot of text. That's a lot to read out. You're going to be there for 5 minutes just talking at them? That's not role-playing. We've got introductions. Now, the adventure's laid out in phases. But what I found really confusing is I was like, oh, so the system is set up for adventures to be structured differently. In that you are arriving, so that's the arrival phase, then you're investigating, that's the investigation phase, and you go through the adventure like that. It's a different structure to a role-playing game. They are not mentioned anywhere else apart from the sample adventure. It doesn't mention them in the rules segment at all. The start of each of the phases does kind of detail it a bit. So, in the arrival phase, you will introduce your players to the start of the mystery by allowing them to explore the aftermath of the hook. Then we've got the exploration phase 1. In the exploration phase, you'll show the adventurers they're on the right track with their investigations. They follow the first reveal to somewhere new. Exploration 2. Now that your players are in the second exploration phase, they should know enough about the actual mystery to pursue it directly. And it goes on through these phases, but actually in the structure of what's happening, because they are travelling to a place, it seems pretty conventional in the way. They just seem to introduce these phases without really detailing them too well on how you run your adventure based on them, if this is a new structure. But as I said, the production quality is lovely, the artwork's absolutely great. We've got sample tickets here, the escalation phase, escalation 2, the climax phase, the epilogue phase, and questions as to what they achieved. And that's the end of the book. Now, it comes in a zip file, and they include a couple other documents. So, they've got the Candela Obscura, which you name your circle, and as you go through adventures, your circle improves, and it gains abilities, which all your players gain access to. This is the party gets abilities. We've also got the field guide. So this is double-sided, or you cut it in half and can hand it out to your players. It's the rules. A quick summary of them. And finally, we've got some sample characters. Now, first of all, I find it kind of odd the way they've laid this out, where instead of highlighting each of the things which are selected, because you can see the hide diamond here is greyed out, and that leads to certain effects. If you're successful on that ability, you are gaining, you're recharging your drives, which you can then use to power skills. So you use your drives to have more successes, and then you recharge them by being successful on those particular skills. So in this one, hide and survey on this first character. But the other ones are just a more darkened ring. And it took me a moment to notice that, to tell the truth, to be able to tell that these were actually highlighted. Now we've got interesting things here like the drives for each of your attribute blocks, so nerve, cunning and intuition. They've got different amount of drives which can be used. We've got the marks here, so basically everybody has 3 health for body, brain and bleed. And when those get filled, if you take more damage, then you gain a scar. And as I said before, you rearrange your attributes here, the nerve cunning, you move the dots around to take that into effect as the scar affects the way the character works. And you've got the gear here. So during each assignment, choose up to 3. So you start off with potentially all of these, but as you come to encounters, your bleed detector, your hand weapon, bleed containment vial, forged documents, burglary equipment, or body armor, or anything else you note down, you could have accessible to the character, but only 3 of them. So the first 3 encounters you use that. Or perhaps you won't use the equipment because you want to keep a piece in case you need it later, and then never use it. That's kind of one of the gambles of the system. Now we've got the example here, which is the Slink. Obviously a sort of sneaky character, a higher hide here. They come with rolls, and they come with specialities. So, street smarts, you know that keep an eye on surrounders. Whenever you make a survey roll, you may spend any drive instead of only using intuition. On a successful read roll for leverage, you may ask the GM what your target truly wants. Any sway rolls you make using this information also add to your current cunning resistance. So you get extra effects for your specialities. There's obviously going to be lots more. They make very heavy points of available in the full game. We've got illumination keys here. So the drives of your character, without calling them drives because they've already used that name. Anyway, we've got the Slink, we've got the Scholar, and they're well read, steel mind, chemical concoction. They have more abilities in convincing people, surveying, focus. The Face, who can sway people, they can hide, they can sense things. They have I Know a Guy, Misdirection, and the Prestige. We've got the Weird. They have abilities Let Them In, Ghostblade, Extend Your Senses. And they seem to be based around focus, sensing, analysing, reading people. You know, read isn't just reading books, it's interpret body language, spot lies, gather motive. And finally we've got the Muscle. So they've got a high move and strike, which is punch, break, knock down, and run, dodge, and navigate for those. They've got search, track, and spot quite high as well, and their abilities are behind me, spend 1 nerve to choose an ally in the same area you use about to take a mark from a phenomenon, describe what you do that allows you to take the mark instead. Tenacious, and field experience. You've travelled the world and been in many dangerous positions. Once per assignment, describe to the group how a previous adventure is similar to your current situation and refresh 1 nerve for everyone in your circle. So there's various abilities in there, most of them powered by description, so good role-playing opportunities. But as I said, the game itself, not impressing me. There's some interesting rule elements, it's beautifully presented, but I find that the history it's giving you is way too much in the past. While it influences the way the world works, it doesn't influence what's going on at the moment. So, while it talks a lot about how the city was formed, you're investigating a corporation, and it'd be more interesting to know how the corporations fit into the structure of the current city. Do they have lots of influence? Or is the influence more through the nobles? But anyway, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough. As I said, I'll do a rules breakdown on this and go through how the rules work, which the video will come out this Friday. But otherwise, I'd better shut up. So, thank you for watching. But most of all, as always, you look after yourselves. And I'll catch you later. Bye now.